Hey, it's October 13th, and today we're going to talk about Marvel Comics. The This Week in Marvel Unlimited Reading Club, which you may remember I read The Punisher as part of that a few weeks ago. I realized that the title, This Week in Marvel Unlimited Reading Club, is a little misleading because it seems like it should be a weekly thing. It is a weekly podcast, but the reading club is once every 2 or 3 weeks. So previously, I read The Punisher for a part of that, and I didn't really know The Punisher really well, so it was very interesting to me. This time, the reading is Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, the 1976 series, issues 107 through 110. This little mini is called collectively The Death of Jean DeWolff, and it ran in the end of 1985 to the beginning of 1986. A few things I want to get out of the way. I'm going to mention the creators of this comic. That's something that I'm really now striving to recognize, because it used to be that I just recognized the stories and the characters that I like. And I'm trying to focus now more on who wrote it, who did the art, things like that, so that I can sort of get a feel of things that I like. And also so that I can start following individual writers and artists and sort of build that kind of fandom rather than just being a fan of individual characters. So The Spectacular Spider-Man 1976, this little bit is written by Peter David. Penciler is Rich Buckler, inks by Brett Breeding, colors by Bob Sharon, and letters by Phil Felix. And now something cool that I didn't realize before, because I clearly have been a terrible comic book fan and not paying a lot of attention to authors, but Peter David actually wrote Deadpool's The Art of War, which ran last year and I super enjoyed. And he's written a lot of comics. If you spend some time just scrolling through his Wikipedia list, it's ridiculous. And so he wrote this particular set. As I mentioned, this is called The Death of Jean DeWolff, and it centers around a criminal vigilante called the Sin Eater, who kills a police captain, a woman named Jean DeWolff, who was friends with Spider-Man. Well, was acquaintances with Spider-Man. Spider-Man discovers that she sort of maybe liked him a lot more than he thought, and he feels like he could have liked her, and so he feels very personal about her particular death. And then the Sin Eater proceeds to kill several people who he believes have sinned against the world, and usually they're people in positions of power who he thinks are corrupt. Seen a little bit of parallels to some of the other stuff that I read in Punisher, but one of the cool things about this is that this features also Matt Murdock, known as Daredevil, which was really cool. I like seeing crossover and characters interacting, and of course Daredevil was in the issues of The Punisher that I read. So it's cool to see a couple different versions of him several years apart, and that's really neat. So the storyline is that both Spider-Man / Peter Parker and Matt Murdock / Daredevil are tracking down the Sin Eater because they both have a personal stake in the game. And it's very interesting to see the difference between who Peter Parker is and who Matt Murdock is. So for Peter, this is very personal, and he wants, I guess, revenge, justice, and he very, very much wants to beat up the guy who did this to his friend and make sure that they pay. Matt Murdock wants justice for his friend, a judge who was killed, but he wants it in the sense that he wants the person arrested and taken to trial and then sent away to jail. And it's interesting to see the dichotomy of the two balancing against each other and trying to decide who is right. And Matt Murdock even has this bit in the middle where he wonders, does the fact that Spider-Man is so passionate and wants to beat this guy up in such a way mean that Spider-Man feels too much, or that Daredevil feels too little? And that's an interesting question, and not really one that I think we can answer. Because if my friend was killed, would I be the type of person who would want to go after their killer and potentially make them pay with their life? Or would I be willing to let the justice system do their job? And it's balanced out too by the fact that Peter very early on stops these muggers who were attacking an old man, and the lawyer Matt Murdock gets them out without bail as first-time offenders. And so that sets off sort of a clash between them as people, because clearly Peter knows that they're guilty and he's really upset that they got off. But for Matt, it's all about following the law, and people are innocent until proven guilty, and you don't want to mess up the system, because the system needs to work in order for the world to avoid chaos. And if the system doesn't work, then you need to fix the system. You don't take it into your own hands. And it's kind of cool to see these two heroes who very clearly actually follow the same morality be on such sort of opposite sides as to how to handle these villains. And as the story progresses, they interact several times, and Matt Murdock figures out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker because he can hear his heartbeat and hear his voice and instantly recognize who each person is. And that's really cool. And then they sort of parallel this case with one or the other being ahead, getting to all of these clues. And you see the difference between the way that Daredevil does stuff. He's much more cool and calculated, versus the way that Spider-Man does stuff, which is with a lot of passion and sort of leaping before you look. Which makes sense in many ways, first off because of Peter's history versus Matt's history. Who they are as people and their ages, I think, make a difference. And eventually they come to a head when they do corner the Sin Eater. They discover who he is, and Peter realizes that it's a detective who was assigned to the Sin Eater case, who's basically been leading Peter on a wild goose chase. And he gets so mad, he starts beating him up and basically beats him to a pulp and is gonna keep going. And Daredevil has to pull him off and like chase him across town and try and get him to calm down. And that fight was very interesting to me because during this fight, Daredevil is trying really, really hard to distract Spider-Man, and he keeps having this internal monologue where he's thinking, I've got to keep him focused, because if I don't keep him focused, or like if I don't keep him distracted, then he's going to be able to focus and he's going to beat me up. And that was interesting to me because I just recently, as part of the Unlimited Reading Club, sort of before I started doing videos, I read a Daredevil set, the 2011 Daredevil numbers 16 through 21, where Daredevil is fighting this creature called Coyote. And one of the interesting things about that series is that the villain literally takes Matt Murdock's head off. Like, he removes his head using this device. And Daredevil's inner monologue is, I realized he'd removed my head, and that's the moment I knew I'd won. Okay? This guy gets his head taken off, and he's like, yep, I'm definitely gonna win this. I got this in the bag. This is nice and easy. And here I am a few years earlier, and he's fighting Spider-Man, and he's like, if I don't keep him distracted, he's gonna lay me out because there's no way I can handle this. And that's interesting to me because I wonder if it's a difference in the way that writers think of Daredevil, or perhaps his character himself has evolved in that amount of time to like develop that calm and readiness, or is it just experience or difference in writers? And so I find that kind of interesting to see those two different versions of the characters. And that's one of the cool things too about reading comics from different eras, is that you get a feel for different sides of the character and sometimes how the character has evolved over time. And it's also cool to see Daredevil coming in and out of different series and sort of see how he interacts with other people, because I feel like he's different as a superhero than most of the other characters that he interacts with. Matt Murdock has a sense of justice that is very different from anyone else, partially I think because he is a lawyer, and so that system is sort of ingrained in him. So I really enjoyed this series and these 4 issues right here. It was fun for me to read this, especially because I've read a lot of Spider-Man, but most of it things that came out after I was born, and this is from before I was born, so it's kind of cool to see older Spider-Man and to see the differences in evolution. And also this sort of version of Spider-Man is a lot more hot-headed than he is currently, which is because he's younger in part, and also because I imagine the storylines have led to different things, and that changes your personality, sort of how the outside world is affecting you. And so it's cool to see different versions of Spider-Man and to see this sort of younger, crazier, more hot-headed Peter Parker. That's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Once again, if you have comics that you think I should read, specifically Marvel, but I'll take any recommendations, please comment. I love that. And if you are interested in the This Week in Marvel Unlimited Reading Club, or you participate, or you've read the comics that I mentioned, let me know that too, because I would love to talk Marvel comics with you at any point in time. I love comics. I'll see you tomorrow.